All right, hello. How are y'all doing? Yeah. Well, welcome to the. This is the second Yammer session here today. So we had a first one that kind of introduced Yammer. What is Yammer? How do you use it? How are users currently using it? And this session is really focused more on, okay, you've got users using Yammer. You understand kind of what it is, what the features are. Let's go with kind of pushing it out. How would you roll this out to your organization? So really talking about common business practices for communications to your users, developing the plans for that. I discuss an implementation framework and things like that. So is anybody in here new, didn't attend the first session? Yeah? Where were you guys, asleep? No, so well, welcome back. And I'll try to quickly recap the previous session as well here. So for you new guys here, my name's Rob Foster. I am clearly from the United States and from the South, and I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a senior manager at a Big Four financial accounting or financial services firm in Nashville. More randomness about me. I'm a SharePoint MVP. I've just got re-awarded on April 1st, which was an interesting April Fool's Day joke they pull on me every year, but got re-rewarded for the 8th time. I co-host a podcast based on SharePoint called the SharePoint Pod Show, and we've had well over 1 million downloads since we've been started, so it's been a very successful show for us with Nick Swan and Brett Lonsdale. They're based here in the UK. I say I'm a retired author. At one point in my career, I used to write books and such, but it was a long time ago, back when SharePoint 2007 was kind of popular and all that. So I ended up retiring and becoming a football coach. So it's the soccer, so we do that. And so also for fun, in my spare time, I play guitar and Hammond B3 organ, or rock organ in a rock band in Nashville called This Modern Station. So I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Les Paul Rob, and yes, Les Paul is a guitar. And the hashtag for this conference is SPEVO13. So please tweet about the show, and feel free to find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, any social network, Yammer. I'm out there. So international audience, where in the world is Tennessee? Tennessee is in the southeast portion of the United States. It's right there, and it's. Where it's popular for is Elvis is from Tennessee. Heard of Elvis? I know some of you guys have heard of Jack Daniels. I do know that. And we're I always make the joke. It seems to fall flat, but we have both types of music there, country and Western. And Gibson Guitars is based there, and we also have a barbecue, which I'm a huge fan of, as you can tell. So we have barbecue there as well. So it's and actually, I've turned Matt on to some good barbecue down in Southeast Tennessee. So. Anyway, so disclaimer here. I want to talk. I mean, you're clearly going to know my company when you see our Yammer network and we go here. But wanted to just make this disclaimer that anything I say in here are basically my own opinions, my own guidance based on my own experience. Don't represent the views, recommendations, or opinion of my company. I have to say that for legal things, but there. So let's jump right in. One of the things you need to do. When you make the transition from Yammer, from going from a Yammer freemium, they call it freemium subscription, to the enterprise subscription, what you'll find is that, actually, anybody in here not using Yammer? Oh, several hands. Okay. So Yammer, let's take a step back here. So Yammer actually, if you go to yammer.com, what you can do is you can actually go in and sign in. If you're in a small or medium-sized company, chances are likely you have users out there. Somebody out there has probably already created your network. Yammer is based off of your email address, and if you have an @abc.com email address, that's your network, abc.com. So what it does is it groups people with like email addresses into the same network. And what you can do is what we actually found out as a leadership team at my company was our Yammer network was created in 2008. It was created essentially as a grassroots effort to where people started just, somebody created the network, they were on a project team, they started collaborating, and then 10 people joined, and then 20 people joined, and then 30, then 40, and then it slowly grew to where I think up in 2011, I think we had maybe 8,000 people that were in the Yammer network collaborating, and what we had to make a decision on was, well, okay, clearly somebody's finding value out here. If there's 8,000 people, collaborating in this, so there's clearly business value here, and we made the decision to really shift into going into, what else can Yammer offer us? How can we actually solve business problems with this, other than what's being discussed now, which is typically conversational. It was more, hey, I'm having this problem, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Can you help me? And what we wanted to do was really see how we could improve business performance on this. Can we make money off of Yammer? Can we really help our users do their job better? We also wanted to look at integration with current in-house systems. In the last session, we talked about some of the integration points with Yammer, which are they have some Yammer web parts. There are the APIs that are available, things like that. So how could we really make that a reality to where we could bring Yammer in as a seamless experience to our network and allow our users to collaborate in a different way? With integration with current in-house systems, we discussed in the last session, was Microsoft has recently announced that the SharePoint 2013 newsfeed in SharePoint is going to be optionally replaced with Yammer itself. So as you post things and you start sharing things that would normally go on your newsfeed in SharePoint, it's actually going to be posted into Yammer. So that's kind of a recent, within the last couple of weeks, development that can be shared here as well. Can our network grow through acquisition or mergers as we start merging with companies and acquiring companies? Can we grow our people and our company and our business through this cultural initiative? And what we found was, being a grassroots effort, Yammer started growing itself. It was very organic, very user-focused, very driven by the community that happened to be at our work. And also adopting a sound financing approach. So as you move into going to the premium subscription, is it cost effective to do so, right? Is it, do we have people to support it? Do we need people to support it? Do we need hardware? Do we need anything? What's it going to take? So I wanted to pull this up as kind of an example of a relevant posting from, and we talked about this again a few minutes ago, but in the other session. But last night when I was finishing writing my slides, what I did was I logged onto Yammer, and I wanted to find a posting that was fairly relevant to what was going on in the world. And a lot of times when things happen in the world, we'll start seeing within minutes, Yammer will light up and people will start posting in here. And this is one that we had yesterday when you may have heard there was a bombing at the Boston Marathon yesterday. So within 15 minutes of the bombing, this post went out that says, hey, do you know anybody? Is everybody okay? All our colleagues, if you need anything, please post in. So other than just business value, I mean, we're not making money off this, but we are growing a community and we are helping our employees be better by providing some way of communication for them, right? So I thought this was a very relevant post, and honestly, I had nothing to do with this, but it was a very relevant post because, it's again, you can't make money off this, but there is business value in providing this type of communication to where you can have people helping people, right? Not necessarily, I guess, it's not a technical question or people answering questions, but it's more people jumping in, helping people and following that conversation. We had a couple years ago, there was an earthquake around, I think it was around New York. And we had somebody posting, they were actually stuck on a train, and they were posting, hey, I'm stuck on a train. So they were posting and talking with people on Yammer. So it's an interesting thing here. But, business value goes beyond making money, right? It's kind of what I want to go on this, is once you make the decision to go with a social platform, you have to take into account the people, right? Because they are what make your network. And this is a great example of that people side of the social networking piece here. It's more about what your company's really about, is the people, or should be. So I've broken it down here as to how do you implement Yammer once you get that. Once you make the decision to go to the enterprise subscription, how do you implement it? And I've broken it down into really 4 steps that we're going to discuss. The 4 steps really are gaining leadership buy-in, project execution, the Yammer launch itself, and then any after-launch activities. So leadership buy-in, we're going to talk about leadership recognizes the business value, how do you leverage that. Project execution is setting up Yammer, your Yammer network, how do you set it up for success. The Yammer launch, users begin to use Yammer, and then after launch activities, which is very, very critical because once you use Yammer, once you start using Yammer, you need a way to share how users are using Yammer, back with your business, with the actual users. So it helps drive adoption to Yammer, so they can see how other people are using it as well. So let's jump into leadership buy-in. When we started our Yammer network in 2008, leadership was aware of it, but they weren't bought in yet. They weren't sold that, hey, this is something that people are going to use. So what happened was I guess it was around 2010, 2 years after Yammer had unofficially launched at Deloitte, all right, my company, which is Deloitte. 2 years after it launched, something happened and leadership started seeing people are actually gaining value for this. And what we did was we really encouraged our leadership to get involved with us with the launch. Because we really wanted to take a top-down approach to show people that leadership did support this, the launch of Yammer and people using it. So we needed to get them involved somehow. One of the ways we did during the launch was companies, a global company, so we have offices around the world. What we did was we invited our leadership in on the launch day. We had a big launch event, and we launched on November 11th, 2011, 11/11/11, right? So we had a kind of a unique day. And what we did was we invited our leadership in to do what's called a Yam Jam. Okay, it's you ever heard of Yam Jam? But it's basically just a Q&A session with leadership. And what they did was we started in Australia, which is kind of the beginning of the day, and we went 24 hours and we followed the sun around, right? So we had leaders from different parts of the world doing this Yam Jam, doing this Q&A session, and it was very, very successful, and it made people want to go there and ask questions and use the tool. So you had different CEOs or different IT leaders or different business leaders. It could be somebody in a particular function that was a fairly well-known leader in that area, actually going in, and you could ask them anything, right? Just kind of ask them anything. And what it did was it was really twofold. It drove adoption to Yammer, and it also got our leadership involved and allowed people to put a human side to that and ask them questions, to where normally they might not have ever met that person, or they might not have, been afraid to, in a social situation, walk up to them and ask them a question. So it was a very kind of a defining moment for us, is that it did bring that social aspect and it made it a lot easier for people to ask questions to leadership that they might not have ever had that opportunity for. So gaining leadership buy-in for that was very critical, and it is very critical to any system, specifically the social systems, because that leadership buy-in and leadership support will drive success and adoption of your Yammer network. So very critical. Any questions over leadership buy-in before we go on to project execution?
Now when we have this approach, when we like to have the leadership buy-in, it might be also somehow contradictory to this approach, where you have top-down approach in the implementation. And do you have any experience if this somehow distract or people are not so happy later on to participate?
Well, I think there's okay. So let me rephrase your question for people in the back. Your question is, with a top-down approach, do people feel forced to use Yammer rather than?
In this context, we are more about if there is a side effect, which is a completely different approach. Okay, we are now, as management is trying to show, okay, this is the when you have the bottom up, it's somehow okay. We have some freedom. We like to have some initiatives. Yeah. So I wonder if there are some aspects of this that even though those people who have attended those networks later on might think, okay, it's no longer something we really like because it's not now a manager who is saying.
Yeah, I think, are there any side effects for a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach? Yeah, so we definitely want to keep the bottom-up approach. That's how our network was started. It's a very cultural thing especially for the millennials, right? It's very cultural to have a social, millennials have always had Facebook. They've always had Twitter. They've always had all of these tools, not always, but, they've had it for a long time. And they kind of expect that. At the companies have grown to expect that. So really not necessarily, when I say top-down approach, I really mean that leaders are mingled in with the organic nature of Yammer. Not necessarily that they're driving the employees to actually, hey, you will use Yammer for this, but just saying that they support it. And while we do host Yam Jams with key leadership a lot, it's not something you're required to do. You're not scored on it or anything like that. But the leaders are where I say top-down approach. The leaders themselves are more expected to get in with the organic nature of the network, right? To where instead of they're saying, "Hey, I'm leader A and I'm doing this and I'm going to have a Yam Jam and you will participate," it's more they're in there asking and answering questions just like everybody else. And showing that type of support is I think it's critical. Really, when I say top down, I mean getting your leadership involved with the organic nature of your network. Now, there is the aspect of, leadership could potentially change that culture, right? To say, depending on, it could be a legal issue. It could be, how does this organic nature work? And it could have to change based on where you are or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of different factors that could influence that. But really, I think allowing leadership and specifically like your risk team and your legal team to have clear definitions for what you can and cannot do in your Yammer network is critical. And we'll talk about terms of use here in a few minutes. But having that really not changing the bottom-up approach, but really joining that organic culture is where we are. Yeah, question?
In terms of like being a global organisation, how difficult is it to roll out to all overseas offices, take up, obviously the US is probably easier, but in terms of other countries, the culture?
So rolling it out was easy. What we found was Yammer is based off, so the question was, how easy was it to roll it out, to other countries? Rolling Yammer out was very easy. There were some things you had to do, and we'll talk about some of those things here in a minute. Communications, blah, blah, blah. Technology was fairly easy. We did find out that Yammer originally came to us because Yammer, your home network is based on your email address. And I have a .com email address. That's where I'm in the U.S. If you're in the U.K., you got a .co.uk, blah, blah, blah. When we were actually rolling it out, what we found out was, we've got 14 different email addresses that are associated with my company. Well, we got there, we communicated to all of the leaders of those email addresses, and 2 weeks before launch, we found out that there weren't 14 that were, and these are users that are currently in the Yammer network, right? These are that we were looking at. We found out that it wasn't 14, it was 44. 2 weeks before 11/11/11, right? So we had a little scrambling to do there. That was kind of the only hiccup we had. But that was really from a technology hiccup. That was it. It was more communications. Hey, whoops, sorry, we missed you, kind of thing. But that was one of those. But where it gets really difficult is adoption, user adoption, right? So culturally, having leadership buy-in and all that's great, but if it's not in your culture to be social, it could influence the way you drive adoption. Now, a lot of the ways that we've gotten around that is integration, and we had a question a little bit earlier, integration with core systems, right? So we've got things like a profiling system, like your user profile. We've actually integrated a lot of these systems like that with Yammer so that users are using Yammer, we're driving adoption to Yammer, but it might start through another internal system. And I'll show that profiling system here in a minute. But things like things like just showing a feed, or whatever for a particular group drives adoption to Yammer versus just saying, hey, go to yammer.com and everything will be great. That's where it's failed. So driving adoption via integration is where what I've seen is to be a successful approach versus just saying, hey, go to Yammer and start collaborating and your life will change. So you can do that, but I don't know that I would go there based on that concept. Yeah. Okay, so project executions. Once we get into executing the project, leadership's bought in, they're going to start collaborating, all that. Let's get into project execution. Now, what I've got here is this is just common things I've seen, common threads I've seen to help help implement it. And we're going to revisit this slide at the end when we get to steady state. But what I want to really focus on is this whole launch column here. What do you have to do to prepare for the launch? And what are the work streams? And I've got 7 different work streams, 4 of which are on this slide, 3 of which are on the next slide. But things around communications and training and technology and risk, and we'll discuss the other 3 here in a minute. But communications, very important. How are you going to talk to your users? How are you going to tell your users, hey, Yammer's coming. What are we going to do about it? So some different tenets or different, guiding principles here. You might want to reach multiple geographies, functions, levels with a unified and meaning messaging. Meaning, hey, this is organic network. Come and join. Communications. Also, you want to publicize the business value of tools. Saying go to Yammer and use it, it's going to be great, is meaningless to everybody unless you can provide some kind of business context to it. What is the business value you're going to get out of using a tool like Yammer? That should be a key message in your communications to do that. So or when you send it out to your users. So from a training aspect, creating user guides, host in-person and virtual training sessions. Creating user guides, I found just like a quick Q&A, for using Yammer features, very important. And one of the things we did, and let me jump over here to my network. We created a little website out here that just has things about Yammer, and we started posting things like, there's some training guides over here. There's a leadership toolkit. There's a frequently asked questions. And these are all based on frequently asked questions that we get, not the general ones from Yammer. Things like success stories. You can download metrics. You can look at we're posting upcoming features of Yammer. So Yammer has a unique way of communicating with us as customers. They have what's called the Yammer Customer Network, and when you become an enterprise customer of Yammer, you're invited into this network. And what they do is they publicize, here's what's coming, right? Here's what's coming in the next versions of Yammer, and we actually post that here so our users can see it, because not every user gets access to that. But just so, hey, might be some changes. Yammer, if you don't know, is a cloud-based service. We don't control the deployment of their features. It's just going to pop up when the users go in, and they're going to see something different. So we try to keep the users in check with that. And we also provide different resources out here for things like a tutorial video that somebody did. We've got the Microsoft Yammer usage guidelines. There's a lot of different things out here we provide our users. And that was really more around the aspect of training. Now, pre-launch, we also had similar things. It was a lot less content, but we had similar things. We had training guides. We had, here's our terms of use policy. Here's different things like that. The technology, work with Yammer to establish, what you want to do is you're going to have to work with Yammer to establish the Active Directory and network structure. So Active Directory structure is what you're going to have to do, or what you can do, is you can synchronize your Yammer network with your Active Directory. So when users go and log in, you might have a sync from Active Directory that you can actually sync information over into your Yammer profile that's preloaded from what's stored in Active Directory, right? So if things like phone numbers and address and information about the user, you can actually preload with this Active Directory sync. So things you want to think about pre-launch there is, how do we do that? What hardware do we need? Where's it going to run? What fields specifically do we want to sync with Yammer, right? What information do we want to pass up there? So a lot of that stuff is what you have to cover from an Active Directory side. From a network structure side, things like what groups do we want to pre-create? Because sending users to an empty Yammer network might be confusing. You might want to create some specific groups, whether it's around functions in your business, it could be departments, it could be anything. It could be more social related, like we've got one specifically for runners, and so it could be a lot of these things, but really it's important to really work and define that initial structure for your Yammer network and how what groups you might want to preload or pre-populate there with that. Risk and governance. You have the option to, and you really need to write an end-user license agreement. It sounds tedious, but the approach we took really was, let me jump into here. The approach we took really was posting the end-user license agreement, and I'm sure you guys have anybody read an end-user license agreement? Just pages and pages and pages of one? Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? We took more of we wanted this to be in plain English. Post what you can do, what you can't do, information about networks and groups, who can see your posts. This is just information, when you post things, here's who can see them. Your postings are not permanent. Things like, we're going to be cleaning this network out after 18 months or whatever. Just to say, here's how it's going to work. Probably the most critical piece of our terms of use is this do's and don'ts. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Very plain English, very, very straightforward. And any questions that you have about posting is in the do's and don'ts. Things like discussing clients or posting client files, don't do that. Referencing clients, protecting privacy. We have social media guidance, so referencing that document. So then we've got specific guidance for different member firms. So the U.S. has a different policy than Germany. So Germany has very specific things that their users can't do just for legal things that are in Germany. So a lot of that stuff, very plain English. It's very short too. So you can scroll all the way to the end. It's not a very huge legal document. It's there's obviously the disclaimers at the bottom, but very short. Wanted it very easy to do. Now, in doing this, what we have our users do when they first sign in is we have them agree to this terms of use document. So when you first sign into Yammer, you have to create your account, you have to register, you have to create your password, and you have to accept the terms of use policy. So you're going to be taken to the home page. It's going to pop up. Sorry, you can't come in unless you click I accept, and you read it and you accept. So writing that terms of use agreement is very critical, and we chose the short route. Again, we wanted to make it very simple, very readable for users because it is more social in nature.
Can you go back to that previous screen, terms of use? You've got a report of concern. So is this moderated? Do you have teams which moderate the content, or is it self-moderated? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the question was, we've got report of concern. Is it moderated? Report of concern is a link. It's not an app. It's literally just a link out to a page on our intranet. Obviously, you can, if you see something out there, you can say, hey, I think Rob posted something, blah blah blah. You can report a concern out there for that. For the most part, yes, we do have moderators. Are they that busy moderating? Not really. Most of the content is self-moderated. People understand, and people treat posting things like pictures or files or things, they understand Yammer is a business tool. They treat it like a business tool. And if pictures and things like that do get posted, they typically are similar pictures to what you would like have standing up on your desk. Your dog, your family, your kids, or whatever, things like that. One of the things that we actually have seen some moderation on some of the stuff that's being posted is, have you posted a picture of something that is trademarked, or something like that? And have you ever taken a picture of yourself in the mirror like this or whatever? well, there's an Apple logo on the back of my phone, right? So that could be trademarked, or it's a good example of that. But so with the logo there, can you post things like that on your network? I don't know. It's whatever your risk team allows. So that's an example of where moderation might occur, to where you might post a picture that is trademarked. I don't think we've had any incidents of anybody being fired for something they posted in Yammer, or even moderated. Really, it's very self-moderated. A lot of things. If you post something a little off color, somebody's going to hammer you, and it's not going to be a moderator. It's usually somebody else. So that's kind of yeah. But we do have moderators. It's mostly self-moderating.
Just to extend on that, do you ever experience any cases where people kind of then use the Yammer network as a communication channel, and for example, in place of support desks, or they ask questions and therefore expect an answer?
So does Yammer become the help desk? Is your question? I think not officially. We don't say, hey, if you have a support question, go out to Yammer, post a question, and somebody will help you eventually. Whatever. No, we don't do that. We still have a help desk. We still have the numbers you can call and all that. Does that prevent users from posting their questions to Yammer? Hey, I've got this I can't print, or whatever. No, it doesn't. And they do post out there. And what we find is other users, not necessarily the help desk, are posting solutions to that problem. A lot of times when our internet goes down, we'll see it from users, and it'll pop up on Yammer. And that's a good way, and we do interact with users that way to say, hey, we're working on it. We'll see, be back up in 30 minutes or whatever. So we do use it, and what we do find out is users start jumping in and helping each other, specifically for the easy stuff. Hey, I lost access, or I can't install this application or whatever. Well, you should change this setting and do this and that, and then boom, and then it would just be some random user, and things like that. But yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. Is it, or is so?
We've got a team which is the enterprise collaboration team. So if you've got an issue or concern or a query, just post it onto the stream.
Yep.
The team that actively supports engagement and stimulates dialogue, debate, and challenge.
Yeah. Now there is. I want to follow up on that. I was talking to one of the other speakers in the speaker room a little earlier. This morning, very early this morning, and he was talking about, he works on the Office 365 operations team, and that team specifically is using it not necessarily as a support mechanism, but more of a, hey, this service went down internally. They basically post it, and then as people start trying to fix it, they're replying to that Yammer thread. So what they're doing is they're identifying a problem. They're solving the problem by replying to the thread, and then when the problem's solved, that resolution and all that conversation context is stored with that, which becomes a knowledge base, of information about solving problems. And that's actually a great example of how the Office 365 team is using Yammer to solve problems. So in writing the end user license agreement, want to obtain sign-off from all the stakeholders on all policy decisions. You can't just have your legal team go, no. So you want to make sure that it does flow. Typical, very typical. And then establish governance processes. And your governance processes will define what you can and can't post. Things like, if you're a user in Germany, can you post files? Because technically the Yammer data center, Yammer's a cloud-based app, Yammer Data Center is in San Francisco, which is in the U.S., and in the U.S. we have this thing called the Patriot Act, which does prevent a lot of content posting and what you can and can't post, and influences what you can and can't post to your network. So those governance processes will directly be driven not only by what your company can and can't do based on what you have, what you define, but where Yammer is located, where the data center is. So very important to understand that, because that, again, in turn drives your do's and don'ts for your terms of use, right? And a lot of these things, the governance-based things, you can turn those on and off from the Yammer admin tools. So if you decide, we don't want users posting files at all, you can actually just turn that off. It's a checkbox in the admin tools. So very, very easy to do that. The next three streams, work streams, are around policy, being end user advocated and your program management. So policy, for your policies, you want to review individual elements of Yammer functionality. Things like posting files, right? Things like posting wikis or pages or things like that. So that you can turn those on or off based on what your company requires with that. Decide if the functionality should be included in the network. I like to be more inclusive, but there are just certain things that you can't include. And again, we're focusing on the middle thing. Sorry, I forgot my red box. So end user advocated. So this is really more of the organic nature of the Yammer network. And getting back to your question about top down versus bottom up and things like that, what we do find is you always want to defend the interest of the end users, right? So what are they doing? How are they using Yammer? And is it working for them? And if it is, encourage that. Don't shut it down. Don't tell them, really make that a very organic network and that's grown by the users, as opposed to the typical tendency of your traditional IT of saying, no, or your security team of saying, no, here's how it will be, and here's how you will use the system. You don't know how the users are going to use the system. They might go in a way different direction than what you're thinking. So definitely want to keep that end user advocated. Program management perspective, define an implementation plan for the launch. Provide centralized management and oversight of the implementation milestones, and communicate progress to leadership. So that's really kind of the 7 work streams that I've seen are common for a Yammer launch. You can make it go as long or as short as you want. It took us approximately 90 days to launch the Yammer network, and what we did was we included all of this. We synced the Active Directory. We did a lot of this stuff. It happened very quickly, though. It wasn't a 2-year effort. It was very quick and very, very fast. Question?
When you went launch it, in terms of licensing, is it per user or is it per content? Is it sizing? How does licensing work? You talk about enterprise. Is it based on?
Yeah, it's per user. It's per user. I don't know if that's changed since Microsoft acquired Yammer. When ours was pre that, so I think it's per user.
People are just uploading images all the time. It takes up a lot of space. Just thinking in terms of how licensing works.
Yeah. From my perspective, it's per user. That could change. There could be other options available now. As far as I know, it's per user.
I'm just wondering what proportion of potential users are using it?
That's a great question that we're going to discover in the metrics when we talk about metrics. Yeah. So he was asking what percentage of users are actually using Yammer, and we're going to discuss that here in just a minute. You have a question?
Which department is the business owner of your Yammer network? Is it comms, IT?
It's knowledge management.
Right.
Yeah. Knowledge management is the team that owns Yammer. Yep. It's not. I mean, IT helps manage it, but it's KM that owns it for us. Yep.
Can Yammer be treated as a knowledge management tool?
What's that?
Is Yammer a knowledge management tool?
Yes. Is it a knowledge management tool?
The question is if this is a proper solution technology for knowledge management in company. Because I wouldn't say so.
I think it depends on how you approach it, right? I mean, are you going to use it as a knowledge base for information over time? Or are you going to use it as a social networking tool? So, I mean, it could be HR that owns it, right? I mean, it could be HR. I mean, it could be anything. But, the way we approached it is it would be, a knowledge base, a set of knowledge base discussions. And I'll show you why. And this is really kind of I demoed this in the last session, but, why is it? I always like to do this. This is my favorite. I visit this a lot. The Excel tips and tricks group, tips and tricks. And what it is really just users, we have a lot of expert users in Excel. I've got a question about Excel, I can post it here, right? These become quickly, knowledge management articles here that are, really preserving this knowledge and sharing that. And, I like to highlight this. This happened April 12th. This posting was April 12th. So it's somebody's looking for a way to count blank cells, whatever in an Excel document. So they're saying, hey, I've tried this formula, it's not really working, and what's happening is that you've got people going in here and they're responding based with different approaches to solving this problem. So this becomes a knowledge base, right? This becomes a knowledge base for people solving problems, and now it's searchable. I can go in and find this. Has anybody really done this before? So I can go in and do that. So this is kind of following the conversation. They go back and forth for a minute. They say, well, that's nice, it works. This doesn't work. Sometimes this works, things like that. So there's a lot of different things out there that users are helping solve problems here. And that's really why, KM owns it for us, But it could be depending on how your implementation is and how your network's growing organically, right? It could be people are using it to simply just meet new people, right? It's not really contextual like that.
Does KM own the intranet as well in your organization?
Yes. KM does own the intranet.
You mentioned that your Yammer started naturally at the beginning, so it's the same situation we're in, when it's now been heavily used, you've officially launched it. How did you then take over the network? Because it's already been created. You mentioned that you want to get some predefined groups in, and you've already got something there. How did you take ownership of that?
We didn't really. So taking ownership meaning, so when you sign up to the Yammer free subscription, you don't really have admins, right? There's no admin, there's no owner or anything like that. It's just people posting stuff, and they're creating groups and doing all this stuff. So what we did was we started engaging with this group, and we said, hey, what do you think about taking this to the next level and really doing that? From there, as far as taking ownership, we do have management teams that own Yammer from a product management perspective. Things like posting, hey, here are the new features coming. Is Active Directory Sync still working? Support teams like that. But as far as who owns the network, I wouldn't say there's any one owner. I mean, KM kind of is responsible for it, but the users actually own it, right? So it's really the users are driving the content. It's the adoption of that really is kind of, me, I own it, he owns it. He owns it. You own it. So it's more of that perspective is what we're taking is that everybody's an owner of the network, a steward of that content, right? To post that and to really help moderate it and keep it good and up to date and fresh. So that's really there's not really one owner to where we can say, hey, you own all of this. It's a very community driven initiative, right?
You mentioned before that there was turning off file sharing, for example, in the admin settings. Is that all functionality which you gain once you make the jump to enterprise? So we've got a network created for our email address.
Mm-hmm.
We jump to enterprise. Is the network kind of refreshed at that point?
No. It starts. They turn on the enterprise features and you're gold. But yeah, all of the previous content is still there. Yeah. That's something we ran into is, well, what do we do with the previous content? Because we had 3 or 4 years of content that was somewhat stale. Do we delete it or not? And we actually left it for, I think, maybe 6 months. And then we started our policy of deleting content every 18 months. That was 18 months old or longer. We would delete that after 6 months of the go live launch.
Can you archive after 6 months?
So you can archive, yes. Yammer does provide a fairly nice tool that you can, and I'll show you this here. They do have a content export tool. I mean, it's not very elegant. I mean, it exports the content and you can archive it, but essentially you can click this export data. You pass in a date for when you want to export data from. Export all data since this point in time, and it'll export that for you. And then you can archive it off there. But Yammer, if you don't delete it, it stays out on the Yammer network forever. Yeah.
And just going back to ownership, did you find that sort of naturally happened over time, or did you have to foster that through sort of super user groups and then talk about governance, or does it sort of govern itself through people just coming in and
Yeah, so what we did was we quickly identified champions for the network, right? So people that were gonna advocate the network and people that are gonna be not really responsible, but do things like end user training at our local offices or whatever, but really tried to identify champions for that network based on people that were, top users. And, what we did from there was those champions started identifying other champions, and then it grew that way. But yeah, it was for the most part very organic. It wasn't, it was very planned and calculated, but it grew on its own, right? It wasn't something to where we said, okay, we're done, right? It's because you're never really done. It wasn't a point in time in the project where we said, we've got all the champions we need, let's move along. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was very organic, and it still is very organic. So wanted to go on to the Yammer launch. We don't have much time left, actually. I could talk about this for days, but the activities leading up to the Yammer launch. Want to talk about communications to users and a lot of that. So posting an article on your intranet. I just posted this is a screenshot of an article on Office 365. It's our SharePoint 365, but it's something like, "Hey, Yammer's coming. Have you ever blah 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 had a question on this? What is Yammer? Yammer lets you do this. Why should I use Yammer?" A lot of this stuff, really is just an informational article. Let people know, hey, the launch is coming. We're getting ready to make the turnover, because you're going to have a subset of users that have been using Yammer. They know what it is. They know how to use it, but you're going to have a majority of users that have no idea what Yammer is. They've never even heard of it, right? So just, really comforting that that confusion, right? And just understanding, hey, this is coming, what can I use it for? But largely use it to build the case for how they can solve problems with it. Not just saying, oh, Yammer's a great tool, you should go there and check it out. But really, what's the business case? What can I do? How can I make my job easier by going to Yammer? And posting that there. Another communication that typically helps is an executive email from CEO or from the CIO or whatever, whoever's driving it, the chief knowledge officer, in our case, saying, hey, Yammer's coming. Here's how we're going to support it. Here's what this means. There's a current network out there. Blah blah blah. So very very important to do that. Hosting awareness events, very important. So some ideas around awareness events. So for Yammer users, creating an announcement in Yammer. Announce it to the users. Hey, guess what? This thing we're doing called Yammer is going live. Let's make it successful. Also a Yam Jam to generate excitement, help identify the champions, and also to crowdsource. So things like, what features do you guys use most, right? That's very important, because understanding how the users are using Yammer could help influence your policy decisions for what gets turned on and off. Right? So if we see users, you might have a stream of business to where users are posting files and it's making money for the company. Well, I don't know that I would turn that off. You might want to find a creative way to actually use that because you're making money off of that. Identify and prepare groups for users to join. I understand, what they need. Do you want to create a runners group, or do you want to create a motorcyclist group, or a juggling group, whatever, or do you want to create departmental-based groups? I'm in HR. I need an HR group. I need a policies group. I need an IT group, things like that. For non-Yammer users, get the information out how you do. Whether it's a kickoff call, it might be a kickoff call to your users, some kind of webcast to describe Yammer, maybe a demo, and develop posters for display in the office locations, anything you can do. Yeah, question?
Is Yam Jam a Yammer term?
I'm sorry. Yes, it is a Yammer term. Yam Jam is like anybody can use. Yeah, it's basically like a Q&A session. We have Q&A. It's like Q&A sessions with leadership. We have a Yam Jam to where the global CEO will come in, and you can he'll post a question on Yammer, and it's like we can ask him any questions, or hey, what do you think about this, or whatever. And Yammer calls it a Yam Jam, and we've kind of adopted that tool as well. Yeah, Yam Jam is just essentially just a Q&A session with leadership or anybody, right? Yeah, it could be a team Yam Jam. All right, so taking it down from leadership, executive leadership, down to the departments. maybe you might want to have a departmental communication by line managers. Introduce your teams to Yammer, right? To where you have, the executive leaderships come down, then maybe you take it another level deeper to introduce your teams and figure out how are our teams going to use this? How are we going to use this as a team to do work? Set up departmental-based groups for users to join, things like runners or HR or new employees is a common one we see, to where new employees can join Yammer and join that group and actually connect. One of the things that we found is working in a very large global organization where users are very distributed, some users work from home, you might not ever see anybody from your office, is finding people with like interests, right? So if you have a new employees group, you can actually jump in there and start meeting people that are new and, trying to find the same information as you and things like that. So, it's very important to do that and provide that medium. And, you probably have something in your organization that allows employees to connect. This is just another medium for that, just another way to do that. Getting closer to launch. Let's post an update article. So, hey, Yammer's launching on Tuesday. So come join leadership in a Yam Jam Q&A session, right? So at 9 a.m. So that's again, still furthering the communication channel to the users so that it's fresh on their minds. Email to remind them for the network launch reminder, and then launch. So basically, the launch is essentially nothing special. It's not really anything you turn on. It's just the date you choose. Hey, we're live. So that's really what it takes to launch it. For us, I mean, the only thing we had to do really to launch it was copy in the terms of use. Click the checkbox that says users must accept the terms of use the next time they log in, and then we changed the logo to something more official. So that was it. That was all that was involved in the launch. It wasn't anything. We didn't have to install servers or really deploy anything other than the AD sync stuff, which had been running for weeks before the launch. So after launch activities here, what I really want to talk about here, and we've only got about 5 minutes left of the session. Want to talk about getting to that steady state, and I want to talk about driving adoption. So one of the questions we had was, how do you drive adoption to Yammer? And I mentioned something about driving adoption via the APIs. Well, here's an example of our profiling system that's actually running. This is actually running in SharePoint, and this is our user profile. It's a global user profile, and what we've got is we've got all these tabs on the bottom. And most of this information is actually coming out of SharePoint, from the SharePoint user profile. So things like my position, my tenure, my whatever. We got all this stuff in here about me as a user. And some fields are driven by MMS. Some are driven by how long. This is something that I've actually added here. What's my additional tenure at my company, and things like. You'll notice that there's one for LinkedIn, but there's also a Yammer Feeds tab here. So if I click on this, I'm actually driving adoption to Yammer. You can see it's loading. And I can look at my networks. These are my feeds. These are people I've followed. I can post information to Yammer. Okay, so while I'm not actually at Yammer.com using it, I'm still using Yammer, right? So this is a way that we're actually driving adoption of Yammer to go, what's that? I probably need to do this and see that. So you can see I've followed these people. There's a lot of this stuff. This is actually my feed pulling. So I went to Yammer.com. This is what I would see as well. So driving integration to Yammer this is all custom code that made this happen, but it was via the API that we integrated a system like SharePoint with systems like Yammer. Of course, here's also LinkedIn, right? So I've got an integration point with other systems outside of the context of my network. So that's that. Let's go back into Yammer. Let's look at some metrics. And we post all these metrics out for our users to see as well. And if we look at the analytics, here's some of the analytics that Yammer provides, and you can export this data. So you can see in the past 7 days, let's make it interesting. Let's go. You can either do 7 or 28 days. So let's see in 28 days what we've got. So it's still loading. There it is. So in the past 28 days, we've had posts that have had 21,000 likes. Okay, we've grown our network by 2,183 members. There's been in 28 days 29,561 messages that have been posted, so about 1,000 messages a day. In 68 nodes, 2,302 files. That's broken. That should be showing something there, but memory engagement. So this is all about messages. Messages we're posting. How are they classified? Are they private messages? Are they group messages? Or are they total messages total messages of all time means that, since the network started and within those 18 months that we have content available, within 18 months we've had 658,000 messages posted to Yammer, right? So you've got, groups here. How many groups were active? So these are basically active groups means people are posting in these groups, right? So what are the top public groups? So you've got all this stuff here. And top public groups meaning, you can see this is a top public group because it's got the most messages, but there's really only one person posting there, so I don't know what that means. So, he or she is busy posting in that group all day long. But files. So these are files uploaded. So based on the files that were uploaded, how many files were viewed, and how many total files do we have uploaded to the system now? So there's a lot of really good information here, right? That you can understand how users are starting to use your system. Notes created. Here's the public notes. One of our popular public notes is a thought for the day. Things like that. How are people accessing Yammer? Are they going in via the web? Right. So you can see 76% of our people are going in from SharePoint. 43% of our users are going in. 76% of our users going in using the web, 43% of our users are going in using SharePoint. Okay, and you've got desktop, you've got mobile, and Yammer embed is none. Right? So how are they coming in? Are they using the iPhone? This is mobily. Are they using 73% of users are using iPhone, 15% iPad, 8% Android, 3% Windows Phone, 1% BlackBerry. Very interesting metrics, right? Because it really does show you, what's the most popular device at your company, and how are users most consuming that. So what this does is you can use this information to drive how you deliver mobile applications to your users. If you know that 73% of your users are using an iPhone to get applications from Yammer, chances are likely that number is going to be high for other applications as well. So maybe that might influence how you deliver mobile applications to your company outside of Yammer, right? So a lot of these metrics here, lots and lots of stuff. And I want to see how the members thing comes up, because that's very important. Because somebody asked that question specifically. Let me just reload the page. There we go. So member engagement. So we've got, out of the 200,000 people, we've got 88,000 members that have been active. And 33,000 people were active within the last 28 days, okay? Not exactly a high percentage, but that's a lot of people. So that means 33,000 people posted something in Yammer, right? They did something.
Write that down to geographical locations?
You can, but that's really more of a content export, and you have to load that into their Yammer profiles, right? Because you have to understand your Yammer profile is different, and that has to be an attribute of their Yammer profile so that you can filter that on geographic location. It's available. You have to export that type of data with the API, so it's not available like this. You have to actually go in and do custom coding. This is all out of the box. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
In terms of measuring kind of maybe the business return back to the leadership or back to the organization, do you present any of these metrics to them, or are they?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we present it to them. They're fully versed in the website where we post it. So we present it to them as well as post it, publicly to the users. Because the only people that can get to these analytics numbers here on the website are admins. So it's not available here. We just copy and paste it and post it there.
You said you have 44 something email addresses. Are they all accumulated in this number here?
They are. Yeah. So when you decide to launch your global network, or if you have multiple email addresses, Yammer will work with you to say, and they'll do it on their end. They have to do it on their back end, and you say, well, here's my list of email addresses. I want all of these email addresses to be associated with this network. That's only available in the enterprise subscription.
What's the impact of this change? I mean, how information across those different networks? Because out of the box, you can share the information within one network.
You can create an external network for that. If you wanted to keep, say we had 44 email addresses, we could have created 44 separate networks and then created an external network that everybody went to. Wasn't the best approach for us, might work for somebody else, it wasn't the best approach. We wanted one single all-encompassing network. But you could do that with an external network. Now, the external networks, it's very difficult to automatically invite people, right? Because when you have 200,000 users, sending out those invites as new employees come on and they leave, very difficult to send invites to that automatically. So when they log into Yammer, it shows up. So that's very difficult, and it's also very easy. It's a slippery slope to basically to allow, so any email address can join an external network. So if somebody goes out there and accidentally invites a client in, they can actually see that. That's what.
Isn't so that as a part of the transition from the premium version to the enterprise version, can you do a transition so that you will, instead of having this 16 number of different country networks, you have one single, like, instead of de.ab.com, you have just the company name com.
Yeah, and that's what Yammer does on the back end. They basically say everybody with these email addresses belong to whatever abc.com, and then you're automatically logged into that. Guys, we're about 5 minutes over. I do apologize, so I want to go ahead and end the session now. But glad we could cover the metrics and stuff. But I'll be up here for the next 15 or so minutes. Please, if you have any questions, let me know. And thank you for coming.